The glass
This place
shattered
is
before
amazing.
anyone understood
It
what had
is. I'm
happened.
so excited.
It wasn't
Me
loud,
too. Everything
just
looks
the fragile
wonderful.
crack of
Good.
a champagne flute slipping from trembling fingers. But in the candlelit hush of Manhattan's most exclusive dining room, it might as well have been a gunshot. Every head turned. The little girl froze. And the billionaire heiress standing beside her table looked like she'd forgotten how to breathe. "She's with me." The words weren't sharp. They weren't angry. They were steady, calm, certain. But they changed everything. The restaurant sat 50 floors above Park Avenue, all polished marble and golden light, the kind of place where deals were whispered over caviar and people wore watches worth more than most mortgages. A string quartet played near the window, their music floating softly over conversations about IPOs and acquisitions. Emma Carter didn't belong there. Her sneakers were scuffed. Her brown curls were tied, back with a pink elastic that had lost its stretch weeks ago. She was 8 years old and clutching a paper gift bag, decorated with hand-drawn stars. And she was standing alone beside the most powerful woman in the room. Charlotte Whitmore was used to attention. At 34, she was the only daughter of tech magnate Henry Whitmore, heir to a multi-billion-dollar empire built on cloud computing and defense contracts. Business magazines called her America's Ice Princess. Investors called her brilliant. Employees called her intimidating. But in that moment, as Emma stood beside her table, small, wide-eyed, and clearly out of place, Charlotte felt something she hadn't felt in years. Uncertainty. "Sweetheart," Charlotte said carefully, lowering her voice, aware that every nearby table was pretending not to stare. "Are you lost?" Emma shook her head. "No, ma'am. I'm not lost." Her voice wobbled anyway. I needed to find you." A ripple of murmurs spread through the dining room. Charlotte's security team, positioned discreetly near the entrance, had already stiffened. The maitre d' looked like he might faint. Children didn't wander into private executive dinners. Not in this building. Not on this floor. Charlotte offered a tight diplomatic smile. "Find me? I'm afraid you have the wrong—" "She's with me." The man's voice carried across the room, smooth and controlled, yet threaded with something deeper. Protectiveness, maybe. Heads turned again. Daniel Carter stood near the elevators, one hand resting lightly on his daughter's shoulder as if anchoring her to the earth. He wasn't dressed for this room. His suit was clean but clearly off the rack, his tie slightly crooked, his shoes polished by hand, not by valet. He looked like a man who worked hard. He also looked like a man who wasn't afraid. Emma exhaled in visible relief. "Dad!" Charlotte's eyes flicked between them. "You're aware this is a private event?" she asked, her tone cool but not cruel. Daniel nodded once. "Yes, ma'am, I am." Security had started moving. Charlotte lifted a single hand, stopping them mid-step. "Then perhaps you can explain," she said evenly. Daniel swallowed, not out of fear but out of humility. "My daughter wanted to thank you." A faint, confused crease appeared between Charlotte's brows. "For what?" Emma stepped forward before her father could answer. She thrust the paper gift bag toward Charlotte with both hands. "For my school." The room went quiet. Charlotte blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Our school was going to close," Emma continued, her words tumbling out now that she'd started. "The roof leaks when it rains. And we don't have enough computers. And Mrs. Alvarez said we might have to merge with another district and—" She took a breath. "But you gave money, and now we don't have to." Recognition flickered in Charlotte's eyes. 3 months ago, her foundation had quietly funded a grant for under-resourced public schools in Brooklyn. It had been a line item on a spreadsheet, a strategic philanthropic investment advised by her board. She hadn't visited. She hadn't met a single student. It was good PR, good optics, smart business. She hadn't expected a child to show up in person. "You came all the way here for that?" Charlotte asked softly. Emma nodded. "Mrs. Alvarez said you probably wouldn't remember, but my dad says it's important to say thank you when someone helps you. $100 million in annual revenue. A company valued at $12 billion. A calendar booked in 15-minute increments. And somehow this 8-year-old had just undone her." Daniel stepped forward carefully, aware of the eyes on him. "I'm sorry to interrupt your evening," he said. "We tried contacting the foundation office. They said you were here tonight. Emma didn't want to mail the card." Charlotte looked at the gift bag in her hands. Inside was a folded card decorated in glitter glue. Beneath it, a small ceramic star, crooked, imperfect, clearly handmade. "I made it in art class," Emma explained. "It's supposed to mean you're a star for helping people." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't how these dinners went. This wasn't scripted. There was no press. Charlotte felt something press against her ribs, a memory she hadn't visited in years. She had once attended a public school. Before the empire, before the penthouse, before her father's company went public and everything changed. She remembered leaky ceilings. She remembered teachers who paid for supplies out of pocket. She remembered being 8. "Your dad's right," Charlotte said quietly. "It is important to say thank you." She looked at Daniel then, really looked at him. There were faint grease stains near his cuffs. His hands were rough. "Not a banker. Not an investor." "What do you do, Mr. Carter?" "I'm a mechanic," he replied. "Own a small shop in Queens." "And you brought your daughter into this room full of strangers?" "Because she wanted to express gratitude?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Yes, ma'am." "Weren't you worried about security? About appearances?" He gave a small shrug. "My daughter's courage matters more than my comfort." That did it. The tight, polished composure Charlotte. Whitmore had spent a lifetime perfecting cracked, not dramatically, not publicly, but enough. She pulled out a chair. "Would you both join me?" Gasps fluttered across linen-covered tables. Daniel shook his head instinctively. "We couldn't possibly—" "You could," Charlotte said gently. "And you will." Emma's face lit up like fireworks over the Hudson. They sat. The conversation at neighboring tables faltered. A venture capitalist across the room checked his watch, irritated. The evening's keynote speaker whispered to an assistant. Charlotte ignored all of it. She asked Emma about her favorite subject. Science. About her friends. Too many to count. About what she wanted to be when she grew up. "A teacher," Emma said firmly. "So kids don't lose their schools." Daniel's throat tightened. Charlotte noticed. "You're raising a remarkable human," she said quietly to him. "I'm just trying to raise her kind," he answered. The simplicity of it hung in the air. Kind, not powerful. Not wealthy, not influential. Kind. Halfway through dessert, Charlotte made a decision that would ripple far beyond that dining room. She turned to her assistant. "Cancel my 11 o'clock tomorrow." The assistant blinked. "Your board strategy session?" "Yes." Charlotte looked back at Emma. "I'd like to visit your school." Emma nearly knocked over her water glass. "Really?" "Really." Daniel stared at her, searching for corporate politeness, for empty promises. He found none. "You don't have to do that," he said quietly. "I know," Charlotte replied. The next morning, cameras lined the cracked sidewalk outside PS 184 in Brooklyn. Word traveled fast when billionaires changed their schedules. But what the cameras captured wasn't a publicity stunt. They captured Charlotte kneeling on a classroom floor, listening to a child explain a science project about constellations. They captured her climbing a ladder to inspect the patched roof herself. They captured her laughing, actually. Laughing when a group of third graders asked if she was famous. They captured Daniel standing quietly at the back of the room, pride shining in his eyes. 2 weeks later, Charlotte announced the expansion of her Foundation School initiative, tripling its funding and requiring every executive at her company to volunteer at least once a quarter in a community program. When a reporter asked what inspired the change, she didn't mention strategy. She didn't mention tax incentives. She said one thing: an 8-year-old who understood gratitude better than most adults I know. The night of the next executive dinner, Charlotte arrived early. She chose a table near the window. When Daniel and Emma stepped out of the elevator, this time invited, no one stared. "She's with me," Charlotte said before anyone else could speak. And this time it wasn't a defense. It was a declaration. Emma slipped her small hand into Charlotte's. Daniel watched them, his daughter and a woman once described as untouchable, laughing, over dessert like old friends. Kindness, he realized, didn't flow in one direction. Sometimes the person with billions needed the reminder just as much as the person with nothing but a handmade ceramic star. High above the city lights, in a room once ruled by power and prestige, something quieter took root: humanity. and it turned out to be worth more than all the wealth in the world.